I have buried 3 of my children, and I am still here. Let that settle into you for a moment. Not because I want your pity, but because I need you to understand who is speaking to you right now. I am not a motivational speaker with a rehearsed smile. I am a man who has lived 106 years on this spinning, heartbreaking, extraordinary planet. I have held newborn grandchildren and whispered goodbye to people I loved more than oxygen itself. I have been rich and so poor I fed my family bread and water for a week. I have been healthy enough to climb mountains and sick enough that doctors stopped meeting my eyes when they walked into the room. And now, from this strange and quiet altitude of 106 years, I want to tell you something I wish with every fiber of my tired old bones, that someone had grabbed me by the shoulders and told me when I was sitting exactly where you are right now. Are you in your 50s, your 60s, maybe just crossing into your 40s and feeling something shift, some quiet alarm, some whisper that says time is moving faster than it used to? Then what I am about to share is not just a speech. It is a letter I am writing across time itself, from the far end of a very long life, directly to the version of you who still has so much road ahead. Stay with me, because what I am going to tell you in the next few minutes changed everything for the people in my life who actually listened. And for those who didn't, I watched them spend their final years in a quiet, aching grief that had nothing to do with dying and everything to do with how they had lived. Here is the first thing I need you to hear, like a bell ringing in a silent room. The life you are living right now is not the rehearsal. I know you know that. You have probably said those words yourself. But knowing something in your mind and feeling it in your bones are 2 completely different experiences. Most people I watched in their 50s and 60s were still living as though the real version of their life was somehow still coming, still warming up. The important conversations were postponed. The dreams carried since childhood were filed under someday. There is no someday. There is only today, wearing different clothes. I spent the first 50 years of my life building a business, a reputation, a house with 4 bedrooms and a garden. My wife Rosa filled with roses every spring, and I was so focused on the construction of everything that I forgot to actually live inside what I was building. My children had birthdays in that garden, and so many of those evenings I was at a desk calculating numbers that I promise you I cannot remember today, not a single one. But I remember missing my son Marco's school play because of a meeting I thought was urgent. I will remember that until I take my last breath. Here is something that might surprise you. The most successful people I have ever known were not the ones who worked the hardest. They were the ones who learned earlier than most how to be fully present in the life already happening around them. Presence is the rarest luxury on earth, and the only one that is absolutely free. Now I want to pause and ask you something honestly. How many evenings in the last month did you sit with someone you love, truly sit, without a phone, without a wandering mind, and simply be there? If the answer makes you uncomfortable, that discomfort is important. Hold on to it. Let it mean something. I want to tell you about my friend Enzo. Enzo was a doctor. Brilliant man, proud man, the kind who filled every room with his certainty. In his 60s, he was unstoppable. In his 70s, he began to slow. And in that slowing, he discovered something that terrified him. He had no idea who he was outside of his work. His identity had been so thoroughly fused with his profession that when the profession faded, he faded with it. He sat in his apartment some days, unable to find a reason to get up, not because he was depressed clinically, but because he had never invested in anything that fed his soul rather than his resume. Do not let that be you. Cultivate something now, while you have the energy and the years to let it grow, a creative pursuit, a spiritual practice, a community that has nothing to do with your job title. The people I watched age with the most grace had built an inner life so rich that the outer changes of aging could not hollow them out. And speaking of things the world cannot take away, let me tell you about money and happiness, because I have seen this misunderstood more times than I can count. Money matters. I am not going to pretend it does not. Poverty is not romantic. Financial worry is a particular kind of suffering. But beyond a certain point, and that point is lower than most people believe, more money does not produce more happiness. It produces more complexity, more to protect, more to worry about losing, more decisions that pull you further from the simple pleasures that actually fill a human being with joy. The most contented people I knew in their later years were not the wealthiest. They were the ones who had learned to want what they already had. That is not resignation. That is a kind of mastery so rare that most people only glimpse it in their final years when they can no longer chase what they never needed. Now, if this is speaking to something real inside you, if you are feeling the kind of recognition that means truth is landing, I want to invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel, because this conversation is just one thread of a much longer tapestry. There is more wisdom here, more stories, more of these hard and beautiful truths that most people spend a lifetime searching for. Hit that subscribe button. Bring your friends who are walking through their middle years and wondering what it all means. This is the place for that conversation. Now, let me tell you something about your body that nobody told me loudly enough when I was in my 50s. Your body is not a machine. It is a living relationship. And like any relationship, it responds to how you treat it. I was not careless with my health, but I was neglectful in the way busy people are neglectful. I took it for granted during the years when it forgave me most easily. The irony of aging is that the body you carry at 80 is largely the consequence of decisions made at 50 and 60. You are, right now, making choices that your future self will either thank you for deeply or mourn quietly. Move, rest, eat like your life depends on it, because it does. Not obsessively, not with the joyless discipline of someone at war with pleasure, but with the steady, loving consistency of someone who understands that this body is the only house they will ever truly own. And rest. I want to say that again, because this generation does not hear it. Rest is not laziness. Sleep is not weakness, the glorification of exhaustion. The pride people take in saying how little they sleep, how relentlessly they push. I watched that pride become suffering. The most creative and effective people I knew were also the most deliberate about recovery. Rest is where healing happens. Rest is where wisdom settles into the bones. Let me tell you now about forgiveness, not because it is a nice idea, but because I have watched unforgiveness destroy more lives than poverty, illness, or bad luck combined. I knew a woman, a neighbor of mine for 40 years, who spent the last 3 decades of her life in a cold war with her sister over an inheritance dispute. 40 years of Christmas dinners missed, 40 years of grandchildren who grew up not knowing their cousins. When her sister died, my neighbor sat in the back pew of the funeral with the expression of someone who had won a war but couldn't remember why they had fought it. The prison of resentment has no bars and no locks. You can walk out of it at any moment, but it requires something that feels like surrender and is actually the most powerful act a human being can perform: letting go. Not for them, for you, always for you. I want to talk to you about purpose now, because this is the great hunger of midlife, and almost nobody talks about it honestly. In your 50s and 60s, the ambitions that drove you in your 30s begin to feel different. The ladder you were climbing starts to feel like it might be leaning against the wrong wall. And that feeling, that quiet, nagging sense of "is this it?" is not a crisis, it is an invitation. Your deeper self is asking a more important question than you have ever faced. Not what do you want to achieve, but what do you want to mean? Not what do you want to have, but who do you want to have been? Purpose at this stage of life is rarely found in grand gestures or dramatic pivots. It is found in the small, consistent acts of contribution, the mentoring, the generosity, the phone call to someone who is struggling, the skills shared, the story told, the hand extended. I found my deepest purpose in my 80s, sitting with people in the last chapter of their lives and simply listening, not fixing, not advising, listening. And in doing so, I realized that the greatest gift one human being can offer another is the feeling of being truly heard. What is it that you have? Some knowledge, some experience, some hard-won understanding that someone younger than you desperately needs. That is your purpose. It has been there all along. Now I want to say something about time that will reframe everything. When I was 55, I thought I was running out of time. Looking back from 106, I want to take that man by the hand and say, "You have no idea how much road is still ahead." The tragedy is not that we run out of time. The tragedy is that we spend the time we have as though it is already almost gone, contracting our lives, choosing comfort over growth, familiarity over adventure. And then one day we look back and realize that the caution we called wisdom was actually just fear wearing a sensible coat. If you are 55 today, you may very well have 40 more years ahead of you. 40 years. Think about everything that happened in the last 40 years of your life, everything you built, everyone you loved, every mistake and triumph and ordinary Tuesday that turned out to matter. You may have all of that again. The question is not whether you have time. The question is what you will do with the time you cannot yet see. And finally, the thing I believe after 106 years is the most important truth of all, more important than health, money, purpose, or forgiveness. The quality of your life is determined more than any other factor by the quality of your relationships. not the number of them, the depth, the honesty, the willingness to show up imperfectly but consistently for the people who matter most. At the end of a very long life, nobody lies in the quiet of their room wishing they had closed more deals or won more arguments. They think about people. They think about the warmth of being known. They think about conversations that went deep enough to matter. They think about love, not the romantic fantasy of it, but the real daily practice of it. The choosing of someone again and again, even when it is difficult, even when the easier thing would be to drift. I have loved people badly in my life. I have been impatient and proud when I should have been soft. I carry that, but I have also loved people well. I have been present in moments that mattered. I have apologized when it was hard. I have forgiven when it cost me something. And those moments of real human connection are the inheritance I leave behind. Not in a will, in the hearts of the people who will stand at my grave and know without any doubt that they were loved. That is what 106 years looks like from the inside. Not a list of achievements, a constellation of moments, a long, imperfect, irreplaceable story of being alive with other people. You are still writing yours. Please, do not wait for the someday that never comes. Do not save the good dishes for a special occasion, no more special than today. Do not hold your love at arm's length because vulnerability feels dangerous. Do not keep your apology in your pocket until the person who needs it is no longer there to receive it. Begin now, not tomorrow, now. If what I have shared today found something real in you, if these words landed somewhere they were needed, then I ask you sincerely, subscribe to this channel. There is more of this, more stories, more truth, more of the hard and luminous wisdom that only comes from having lived long enough to see what actually matters. Share this with someone you love who is standing at the crossroads of their own life. Sometimes all it takes is one voice at the right moment to remind us of what we already know in our deepest hearts. I am Vincent D. Russo. I am 106 years old and still learning to live. Maybe that is the most important lesson. It always was.